Hi everybody, it's Miss Lorenz here. I'm going to talk about lesson 13. We're talking about benchmark percentages. So a lot of these you guys have memorized in our fraction decimal percent quizzes that we've been taking in class. So this is just a bit of a review, but it also gives you a chance to apply them in context. So let's take a look at number 1. How much is 50% of 10 liters of milk? Well, you know that 50% is a half, so we're looking at half of 10, sorry, my pen's not working, there we go, half of 10, and that's 5 liters. How far is 50% of a 2,000 kilometer trip? Well, of course, then that would be half of 2,000, which would be 1,000. How long is 50% of a 12-hour or a 24-hour day? It's going to be half of that 24 hours, or 12. How can you find 50% of a number? Well, of course, to find 50% of a number, you are chopping it in half. You're dividing it by 2 or you're multiplying by a half. Remember, those are equivalent strategies. How far is 10% of a 2,000 kilometer trip? Well, when we find 10% of a number, we are dividing by 10. And what that looks like when we have the number dividing by 10 is moving 1 decimal point to the left. So we're at 200 kilometers. 10% of 10 liters of milk. So again, we're just going to divide by 10 to find 10%, and we're left with 1 liter. How long is 10% of a 24-hour day? Again, divide by 10%, or divide by 10, and we're left with 2.4. So how do you find 10% of a number? We divide by 10. And just remember that that also means that if we have n is the number, we would simply move 1 place to the left to divide by 10. So 10% of n would be n tenths, or point n. How long is 75% of a 24-hour workday? Well, I'm going to look at these as taking a fourth of the number and then multiplying my 1/4 times 3, because 3/4 literally means 3 1/4, and I know that 75% is equivalent to 3/4. So a fourth of 24 is 6, and then 3 of those would be 18. 75% of a 2,000 kilometer trip, well, 1/4 would be 500, so 3 of those 500s would be 1,500. 75% of 10 liters, well, 1/4 would be 2.5, and 3 2.5s would be 7.5. So to find 75% of any number, first I'm going to find a fourth, and then I'm going to multiply by 3. If you did some of this work with your parents, they might say finding 75% of a number, you would just multiply by 0.75, which is the same thing. This is a great strategy if you're working on it in your head. You're doing mental math. All right, let's take a look at number 4. Explain how we can calculate these mentally. So we want to know 9 is 50% of what number? And so 50% is half, so 9 is half of what? 9 is half of 18. 9 is 25% of what number? Well, 9 is a fourth of what? It would take 4 9s to make 36. 9 is 10% of what number? Well, it'd take 10 9s to make 90. 9 is 75% of what number? Well, first I'm going to divide by 3 and get 3, and then I'm going to multiply by 4, because to find 3/4, 9 is 3/4 of what number? I'm going to first figure out 9 divided by 3, and then I'm going to multiply times 4 to figure out how many of those fourths. And then 9 is 150% of what number? Well, 100% is, or 9 is 150% of what number? So it's 150% of 6, because I know that if I look at 150% and I chunk that 150% into parts, and this is my 150%, I'm going to chunk that into parts that each have a value of 3, and this whole thing is 150%, so my 100% would be 6. All right, number 5, last one. Match the percentage that describes a relationship between each pair of numbers. So 7 is what percent of 14? 7 is 50% of 14. 5 is what percent of 20? Well, 5 is a fourth of 20, or 25%. 3 is what percent of 30? 3 is 10% of 30. 6 is what percent of 8? 6 is 3/4 of 8, or 75%. And 20 is what percent of 5? So it's going to have to be greater than 100 because this number is greater than the 5. So 20 is what percent of 5? It's 400% of 5 because it takes 4 5s to get to 20. All right. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching, everybody.